To those who are in person and to others online. This meeting is being recorded. I have a visual now. There we go. Welcome to our new creation conversation. We've been having these conversations on Wednesday evenings, inviting some interesting folks to have some conversation around mission as a church. And as we've adopted our new mission statement, joining God's work of new creation, get to hear from some folks and what they're doing to join God's work in their context as a way to help us think about how we're joining God in ours and the ways some of those intersect with each other. So I'm very pleased. This is our first online guests coming to us all the way from Michigan, and have two guests this evening that I'm excited to introduce to us. Naomi Walters is the chair of the Department of Theology and Ministry at Rochester University in Rochester, Michigan. Was previously a preaching minister at Stamford Church of Christ in Stamford, Connecticut. She's got a BS from Rochester, an MDiv from ACU, and a doctorate of ministry from Lipscomb University. Her husband is Jamie, and two sons are Simon and Ezra, who are, where are they now? First and third grade?
Yeah, that's okay. Right.
Hey, all right. Some of her Como Road connections, Naomi was actually a classmate of mine, and as well as Vadim and Emily Kachikov. We were all at ACU together. And so grateful, Naomi, to see you this evening, and thanks for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
And Naomi is joined by Dr. Mark Love, who is the graduate program director of the Masters of Religious Education and Missional Leadership, which is what we're going to hear more about tonight at Rochester University. I previously served as a professor and director of ministry events at Abilene Christian University, adjunct professor at Cascade Christian College in Portland, Oregon, and a minister of the word at the East County Church of Christ in Gresham, Oregon, and also a ministry in Arlington, Texas as well. Mark has a BA and an MA and a DMin from ACU, so he's been hanging around Abilene for many years. Masters of Divinity from Pepperdine, and most recently a PhD from Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. Mark's wife is Donna, his son is Josh, and he has three daughters, Stacy, Brenda, and Cassie, and was quick to tell me three granddaughters also. Josh is off in Portland, I believe, and then daughters and granddaughters are in Michigan there with Mark. I also got to ask Mark about some of his Coal Road connections. Mark's father and mother, Stuart Love and Diesta Love, were on the board of Levin magazine, which I know Paul and Kay Watson served on, as well as John and Carol Shown from here. And Mark also let me know he was rejected for a youth and campus ministry job at Coal Road 40 years ago. So that's a unique Coal Road connection. But it all comes back around. And for those who remember Aaron Metcalf, who was a ministry intern at Coal Mill Road many years ago, Aaron grew up at the church where Mark was the minister, and so is another Coal Mill Road connection that Mark has with us as well. So Mark, we're delighted to have you joining us for this conversation tonight also.
Good to be here. Thanks.
All right. Well, as I've said, so we've adopted a new mission statement as a church, and we're learning what it means to live into that. Our mission is joining God's work of new creation. And there are three expressions, three ways we're wanting to live into that mission, which are embracing all God's people, relying on the Holy Spirit, and joining Christ's global church in the ministry of reconciliation. So this summer, we've taken an opportunity to explore that mission by talking with others who are joining God's work of new creation in a variety of creative ways, and seeing that the way that's intersecting with our call to do that as well. And so with y'all, I really wanted to have a conversation because several folks at Coal Mill Road will know something about that group from Rochester. I'll hear us talking occasionally about that group from Rochester. Maybe some folks here or some folks online have kept Rochester students in their homes. I know that's happened over the past years. Or maybe others have seen you at our church building as you've come to meet for classes throughout the previous years. Or maybe they've just seen you on the church calendar or heard somebody else talking about you. But I'd really love a chance tonight to just talk more about what it is that you've been doing. You've been coming to Durham now for several years, and to have a chance to talk more about what you're doing, why it's important, and to see if there are any kind of intersections there for us as we're thinking about our mission here in Durham and how that joins with what y'all are doing too. So as a place to start, I mentioned, Mark, you're the director of the Masters of Religious Education and Missional Leadership. So many of us here are familiar with the Master of Divinity degree as kind of a ministry training program. That's what I have, and both of you have as well. And we've been privileged to have several students from Duke who are pursuing that. But this is a slightly different ministry training program, and wondering if you could tell us just a little bit more about that and how that relates to y'all coming here to Durham.
Yeah. So the MRE is a weird nomenclature. Master of Religious Education. We got stuck with that when we applied to offer a grad program. There was a grumpy guy from the state of Michigan who said, your undergrad department's a religion division, therefore your grad program is going to be religious education. But basically, our degree is a 36-hour MA. You know, most people are familiar with an MA. And it's a little bit of a boutique degree because it's an MRE in missional leadership. So it's very focused. We began the MRE with two kind of generic degrees, one in BIB studies and one in Christian ministry. And we'd have students take a course or two a semester. The degree had been on the books for 8 years. And when I got here 11 years ago, they had one graduate from the program. So they were either going to wipe out the grad program altogether or offer something distinctive, because we knew we didn't want to go head to head with Lipscomb and ACU or Calvin or schools in our area. So the missional leadership idea is that we're in kind of a new moment, a new missional era in North America, where the old labels and definitions don't apply anymore. So the way I say that resonates with church leaders is that you're doing everything you know to do better than you've ever done it before, but with diminishing impact. It's kind of a sign that we're not in Kansas anymore. And so both the way we think about doing ministry and the way we train those who are preparing to enter congregations in this new missional era has to change. So our degree, again, 36 hours, we don't give electives, we move in cohorts. And so you're with the same 8 to 12 people for 2 years, taking 9 hours a semester. It's been successful because in the 11 years it's been going, we now have over 100 grads, whereas they had one grad in the previous 8 years. So we feel pretty good about what we're doing. One of the things that we emphasize is situated learning. So we want you not to leave your context to come to us and sit in a classroom for 2 years, but we want you to learn in your situation. And so most of the work we do is online. But we do 1 week every semester face-to-face. And because our students literally come from all over the world, we have a student right now from Hong Kong, we've had one from Brazil, we've had one from Tanzania. So it didn't matter if they come to Rochester, they don't care. So we go places where we think we can learn the most. And when I told my son, Josh, about starting this degree and what my idea was, he said, you have to go to Durham, North Carolina. And I said, why? And he said, because Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove is there and the Rutba community is there. And so I had never met Jonathan, didn't know him, sent him an email saying, hey, you've had a big influence on my son. Would you come to Rochester to spend time with our students? He said, no, but I'd be happy for you to come to Durham and spend time with us. So that's how we got going to Durham. I'm gonna tell another little piece of the story that goes to what we're trying to do and how that eventually ended up in Durham. So our main metaphor for leadership in the program is hospitality. We think of leading in the mission of God as maintaining an environment in which people can experience and name God's hospitality. And so it's not just our hospitality, but it's God's hospitality. And that may take place on someone else's home turf. We may be the guests, like in Luke 10, when the 70 are sent out. They are welcomed into the homes of people of peace. This is God's hospitality. So it kind of reverses the expectations of kind of the church having all the goods and being kind of the paternal influence in the world. But now we're seeking God's presence as we consider the ways that God has made room for us with others. So we taught that course for 2 years in Minneapolis. And there was a guy there who I thought would pull in students, which I don't think ever happened, but was part of kind of an avant-garde, emerging missional church. And we hung out with him for 2 years. And it turned out that their church wasn't all that hospitable. They were very casual. They worshiped on sofas in the round. And I'll hardly sit with my wife on a sofa, much less a stranger, I don't know. So, and everybody who was a member there was very familiar. But if you weren't, like, I've been there 3 times and I've yet to have anybody address me. So it ended up being not a very hospitable experience. The second year, I asked the teacher, the leader, to include Richard Beck's book, Unclean, on the reading list. And Richard and I are very, very good friends from my days teaching at ACU. And so I caught up with the class one day when the teacher had Skyped Richard in to talk about his book. And a light bulb went off for me. Like, I know Richard Beck. He would do this for me. And why are we doing it here when our students are having such an amazing experience with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove? Why don't we move that course, the hospitality course, to Durham, fly Richard in every year, have him be a part of our teaching team. So when we show up now, it's me and our assistant director, Natalie Magnuson, Naomi, who co-teaches the course with Richard. The 4 of us come with however many students we have in our cohort. This year was 7. when we came. So we hang out for a week. Richard does stuff. Naomi does stuff. We hang out with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove for a day, which is pretty amazing experience for our students. And we used to worship at the John the Baptist Missionary Church there.
St. John Missionary Baptist.
Yeah, I got most of the words.
You got all the words.
Yeah. Which was great for students to experience, you know, a rockin' African-American kind of worship experience. But one year we came and they had taken the entire congregation on a retreat. And so I asked Jonathan, where should we go? And he pointed us to the Citywell Church. And we went and had an amazing experience there. I mean, they embody so much in their worship of the kinds of things we're talking about with our students. And so now we go there every year. So that, I think, Richard is a huge piece of that week. Naomi is a huge piece of that week. Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove is amazing. But the Citywell experience kind of put the cherry on the top of the sundae for us. It just kind of capped off. And our students will say, the week in Durham is the best week in the program. It's pretty much universal. So that's why we come to Durham. That's what we're doing when we get here. Coal Mill Road's been great to host us when we need space for class, which isn't every year. But with the pandemic this year, we needed space other than our Airbnb. So anyway, that's kind of the thumbnail of what we're doing when we come.
Yeah, thanks so much for walking us through that. And I guess a question for you, Naomi, to hear from you a bit. Some of us may or may not be familiar with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove. He's one of our neighbors here in Durham. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about him. And I'm specifically intrigued by this theme of hospitality too, that's kind of the class is centered around. And as that connects with our mission of embracing all God's people, is connected to this notion, I think, of hospitality. Wonder if you could tell us a little bit about Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and kind of what are you learning about hospitality from hanging out with him?
Yeah, sure. So actually, related to what Mark was saying about how the MRE is a situated degree, one of Jonathan's emphases is his book is one of the books he has written is called The Wisdom of Stability. So being local, staying put, having deep roots in a particular neighborhood, which is the same place you work and the same place you worship, which is a pretty surprising or can strike our students as a little like, well, but I drive past a whole bunch of churches to get to the one that I go to. So it can be a little bit of a struggle for them to imagine how to embody that where they are. But he emphasizes knowing the history of a place, a particular place, knowing the people in a particular place, being able to pay attention to how God's hospitality has been participated in and resisted in a particular location. And Durham's got plenty of those inhospitable stories in the neighborhood that he's in, which has been sort of the, they call it the slave quarters for Duke, right? Like it's where all of the Black folks who worked at Duke used to live. And so he spends a lot of time, yeah, Emily's jumped in to say it's Walltown, right? So he there are lots of stories there of sort of systemic inhospitality, or sort of the resistance of recognizing the theological, anthropological dignity of every human person, regardless of difference. So welcoming the stranger. And so he emphasizes quite a bit the sort of local, stable, the mission of God, the hospitality of God here looks different than it would somewhere else. So the biggest thing we do with him the day that we spend with him is he walks us around the neighborhood and tells us, stand on particular street corners and tells us both contemporary and sort of like layers back historical stories of what happened on this corner and what that house is now and what that house used to be, and what the struggles in this neighborhood are and what the gifts of this neighborhood are and how this neighborhood has carved out a way of being hospitable, despite having perhaps not received that hospitality in the past. So all of that's kind of related to why we're keeping our students in their situation. It's situated learning, as opposed to what you or I did for our MDiv. Like we packed up and, well, you were already in Abilene, but packed up, moved to Abilene, sat there for 3 years, learned a bunch of ideas, and then went out and we were like, good luck, put it into practice somehow. And so that sort of method of learning where you get all your idea ducks in a row and then you go apply them on the ground, it assumes a lot of things, but one of the things that it assumes is that there isn't any theological knowledge emerging on the ground, that you've got it all and you bring it with you. I got all my training and now I'm going to bring it here to this place and I'm going to make it happen. So we're trying to model in the degree itself what we're hoping they'll do as their form of leadership, which is to stay embedded in a particular location and work on practices of discernment and attention that help them see the unique gifts of their neighborhood and what God's hospitality and God's mission already looks like there, and what it would look like for them as leaders to make space for their congregations to participate in that, which is something that Jonathan, at least in the local neighborhood level, helps them imagine more than they have had any reason to imagine when they're probably commuting to their own church buildings. To watch him live and walk and work and eat and worship in the same 1 mile radius is really new to them. And I don't anticipate that they all go home and move into the neighborhood where the church building is, but that they start to think more about locality and stability and less about moving on to the next best job. So that's a start. Does that help some?
Yeah, no, I think so. So a lot of what you're learning, it sounds like, is this connection between God's mission and place from him, that by staying in a place and by paying attention and by learning the history and knowing who your neighbors are, that you develop a greater awareness of what has God been doing here, what is God doing here, and how can we join in that, which is kind of what we're interested in too. So no, yeah, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm curious, thinking about our time, we may need to take this time to kind of broaden out the conversation a bit and see if we have any questions from folks who are here, or if you are online, if you'll write those questions into chat, we will find a way to, or you can just unmute. I'm hearing from our tech folks. So any questions, comments, thoughts? Got one back here. And if you will, in the room, if you'll introduce yourself on the microphone, that'll help folks online know who's talking.
Hey there. This is Luke, and I am asking a question about this idea of geography and how for you it has changed in the time of the pandemic as we've gone into the virtual world. And you've talked a lot about closeness in geographical, physical geographical terms, but how's that evolved during the time of the pandemic?
Yeah, great question, right? Yeah, I think that like Naomi and I also worship with the same community. And the pandemic, we're small enough that we can do Zoom if we can't meet together, and we can see everyone's face. And we were kind of a loose confederation of free radicals trying to find a meaningful worship experience. And because our faces became so immediate to one another, we became a community. In fact, Naomi kind of looked at each other. We've been intentionally avoiding the word church for a while, but at some point during the pandemic, we looked at each other and said, I think we're a church. But the weird thing about that is that my parents would Skype in from, Zoom in from Albuquerque, showing my age there. And Paula Bonbrisco from Colorado, and some young women from West Virginia. And so we kind of got this kind of growing community that's not geographically local, right? Mm-hmm. But the way we attend to one another is very concrete, very specific. Our worship is not kind of abstract notions about God, but sharing the concrete experiences of our life. We're table oriented, and we're not sermon oriented. A lot of weeks we just do dwelling in the word, even though we've got some really good preachers in our group. But the kind of the face-to-face is very important to us, and it delivered something that we weren't getting before that. So, and I think that approximates a little bit what we hope our students get with geography. So,
well, yeah, and I would say too, it's not just that our faces were more visible to each other, but now we're worshiping from our context. Like you're watching my dog run by, you see what's on my bookshelf, you got my like kids doing what they're doing. And that was, we were in the same room when we were worshiping before, but some of that stuff kind of gets left behind, like the pile of laundry, or like the child's favorite Batman toy, or all of that sort of embodied stuff that makes us whole persons didn't naturally come with us into the worship space because you're loading up in a car and driving somewhere. So unlike this micro level, we got to see everybody's home embeddedness and see them in their contexts, and that just changes how you know a person.
Yeah, we can really relate to that with our experience here too, and now find ourselves at this moment where we're coming out of a primarily online connection point back into more in person, but wondering how do we carry what was good out of that? How do we carry some of that intimacy and some of that knowing and glimpses into each other's lives and homes? And that's a challenge coming back to some of this.
Mm-hmm. And I think, we're wrestling with the same sort of thing as we transition from Zoom back to seated, gathered in the same physical space worship. what do we do with these people from out of state who've been worshiping with us this whole time? We don't have a building or tech at all. So we're not really set up to make things hybrid for them, but they have been a part of us. So we're sort of discerning together, not Mark and I together, but the whole community of faith together, what that looks like. At the moment, it felt like, let's do every other week. We'll gather on Zoom one week and we'll gather back in the same physical space another week. And we'll try that for the summer and see where it goes. But one of the things that embodies for us is just sort of an open-handed attentiveness, as opposed to like a close-handed, like, I'm driving this thing and I want us to get back to seated worship as fast as we can get back to seated worship. So that's where we're going. But like a more hospitable and less, so if hospitality is opening up space, then leadership styles that close down room for discernment, we would describe as inhospitable. So we're trying to leave room, time, group discernment space to figure out how we come out of this together. And it's messy and beautiful at the same time. But anyway, that was just you're not alone in trying to figure out, what does worship, a pandemic's a terrible thing to waste.
That's right. That is right. I think I saw we had a question come in through chat. I actually cannot read that on my device. I don't know if y'all can pull that up or not, Naomi or Mark.
Yeah, I'll read it for you. Emily was wondering, what are some ways that a more traditional Church of Christ like Cole Mill can embody some of the elements of hospitality that exist in somewhere like Rutba House?
And Rutba House is
Jonathan's.
Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, and kind of a hospitality house in that neighborhood there in Walltown.
Yeah, they have 3 homes, and each of them, so there are multiple families that are a part of their community, and each of their homes is a hospitality house. So they do a lot of transitional housing. They've done a lot for women, particularly who are leaving prison, need a place to stay. So yeah, that's not, most churches aren't set up for that, right? So how can a traditional church kind of lean into some of what they're doing? And one of the complaints I'll hear from church leaders is the one Naomi mentioned before. We're a commuter church. Very few of us live around the building. Therefore, neighborhood's pretty much meaningless to us. But what they'll find is they have a bucket load of untested assumptions about the neighbors around the building. And I've got several stories I could tell about that. And the building is the one place where every member is public, where your church is publicly visible. So unless you're going to wear t-shirts everywhere you go that say Cole Mill Road Church of Christ, this is the most public you kind of get as a community of faith. So, when we encourage missional innovations, we're thinking, where can we find new partners? Where can we find people of peace in our neighborhood? Where can we find people that can teach us things that we don't already know? And I have yet to really work with a student or a congregation that has been attentive to that and not found a pleasant surprise in there somewhere that leads, it could be a little crack in the way we've always done things that leads us into a new way of life. So I think being attentive and experimenting and looking for partners in the immediate environs of the church building is a place, not the only place, but is a place to start. What would you add, Naomi?
Yeah, yeah. I think in one sense, the shortest answer would be don't do hospitality the way that Ripple House does it, because they do it that way because Jonathan lived in that neighborhood and was present there, and that's what emerged. But on another level, we could say it seems like a lot of the time our functioning definition of hospitality is that we're thinking about it as an activity. Like, how can I go do hospitality? And what we're trying to do with our students in this would be, I'm going to work my way back to Emily's question eventually, is to have them think about a posture of participation in God's hospitality that's already ongoing. And the easiest way to get there, to break that habit of like, how can I be hospitable? How can I do hospitality? Who can I welcome? Is to not be the host at all and find where you can be the guest. Because you can't be in charge of anything when you're a guest. So it's not that you don't ever end up in the host role eventually, but that we just have lots of patterns of, let me figure out who I can help. Let me figure out who I can serve. Let me figure out who I can welcome. Let me figure out. And those aren't bad questions, but they tend to, they're not receptive questions. Like, they usually tend to start us out with our ideas of what is good and move from there. And so there's a lot of God's current activity that we're missing out on. So I think the easiest thing, well, not the easiest, but the best thing to do to see what surprising forms of hospitality are already present is to figure out the places that you can be the guest. Where are the places that you cannot be in charge? So less like, what hospitable thing can Cole Mill now start doing? And more, how can Cole Mill, who can host us? Who's already doing stuff that we can participate in as guests? And then what stories and experiences are we going to have from there? Not necessarily to then replicate, but just what's already happening. What are our neighbors doing? What are our local things? The places where we can be hosted. That's the easiest way I know to break ourselves of the tendency to want to set ourselves up as the host.
Yeah, thanks both of you for that. I think that's really helpful. It made me think, since we've adopted this mission statement of joining God's work of new creation, it's this acknowledgement of God's up to something in the world. It's made me realize what a terrible joiner I am. Like, I'm an observer. I like to watch, see what happens, or I like to try to do it myself. But I've been thinking more and more about, what does it mean to take the posture of a joiner? And when you see something happening, to move towards that. It's a work in progress for me, I know, and I think for a lot of us here. No, we're just scratching the surface of a lot of what we could say here, but we are actually needing to wrap up. If folks are interested in knowing more about y'all, where can they find you? Do you have places online or places to stay in touch?
Yeah, you can find us at the Rochester University webpage. The grad program you can find there. We have a Facebook page, Master of Religious Education, Rochester University. We do frequent Facebook Live things there. We just had a conversation. Richard Beck and I talked about conspiracy theories and kind of the
I don't believe it.
Huh?
I said, I don't believe it.
Yeah. So thanks for that. people in churches tend to be, especially evangelicals, tend to be more susceptible to believing Stevie Wonder is not really blind, or that there's a cabal of baby-eating people who are, doing nefarious things. So Richard and I talked about that, but we talk about the program too in some of the Facebook Lives, and we feature both our faculty and our students. So like our page, and you'll get notifications of when we're having conversations on Facebook Live. We have an Instagram account. You can find us, but Naomi and I would love to hear from you through email. And I'll just add this, Ben, 27% of our students who enter our program are volunteers. They're not professional ministry staff. They're either career people looking to do something new, or they're volunteer leaders in their congregations who just want to be better at helping their church kind of make this missional turn. And so we'd love to talk to any of you who would be interested in a 2-year experience that turns out to be pretty transformative for most of our students. And you get to stay home for one of the trips. You're right there already. So.
Bonus, yeah. Well, thanks for that. And already kind of took us on this turn. I mentioned to you too, I'm asking each of our guests, since our mission is joining God's work, if you have an invitation for us to join something that's going on, certainly joining in the program would be one way to do that. Do you have another invitation for us as we think about how we might carry this conversation forward?
Well, I'll just say, one of the practices that I have my students do as part of the hospitality and leadership course that I teach while we're in Durham is I have them walk their neighborhood attentively every day for 2 weeks. That's the best starting place I know. It's just to walk, not walk and listen to a podcast or run the neighborhood, because really you're just counting to 4 to keep yourself in sync with your running. But like attentively walk a neighborhood, the same path, same neighborhood for 2 weeks. So that would be my invitation if you're looking for like a small, I want to be a guest. Well, just have your eyes up, not down on your phone, and without eyes up, headphones out, walk your neighborhood every day. See who you see what you notice.
Okay, yeah, appreciate that. So, well, thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. And we appreciate you. We're thankful for the partnership we've had with you these past years, and hope that'll continue as y'all continue heading our way regularly. So I'd like to close this evening just with the time of prayer and praying for y'all specifically. So let's do that together. God, we are grateful for the ways in which you are at work in the world. And we are sorry for the ways that we are often inattentive to what those are. So we pray for all of us that you help us to be open to what it is that you are doing and the work of new creation that you are actively engaged in around us. Give us eyes to see what that is, and give us bodies that are willing to jump in and join and to be a part of it. God, I thank you for Mark and for Naomi and for the other folks at Rochester. We're grateful for their vision in training leaders of the church of today and of the future. And we just pray for your blessing on this effort, and as they are training folks who are more attentive to your mission in this world. God, we thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all. And thanks everyone.